Hi, and welcome back to Misty Mountain Gaming. I'm the D&D Wannabe. My name is Rob. I say that at the beginning of every episode, don't I? I'm the D&D Wannabe, my name is Rob. But what do I mean when I say that D&D Wannabe? What does that mean? What is a D&D Wannabe, and why do I claim to be one? I started playing D&D back in 2014 at a house party. A friend of mine had just gotten the D&D starter set for 5th edition. It had just come out and he was really eager to get started. So he brought it to the party, and I'd always heard of Dungeons & Dragons, but mostly as a kind of nerdy pastime or a nerdy passion. Usually I considered it something to make fun of, but being homeschooled, I'd never really been exposed to it. I remember shelves upon shelves at my uncle's house littered with large books whose pages were decorated with terrifying, monstrous, and beautiful creatures. And that was Dungeons & Dragons, or I'm pretty sure it was anyway. Since I understood it to be kind of a nerdy pastime, and I always considered myself a nerd, I played video games and wasn't much for sports and liked cartoons and anime and what have you. As a nerd, and as someone who was a little bit inebriated at the time, I decided to give D&D a try. We played in the middle of a loud and boisterous party. And I can't tell you anything about that first session. It was a good party, meaning that memories from that night are a little hazy. But when I woke up the next day, I distinctly remembered that I had played Dungeons & Dragons. So, after I woke up well and had my coffee, I phoned up that friend and said that I would like to give it a try again. I got in touch with my friend. It wasn't hard. We lived in the same apartment complex, and he said that he was getting together a campaign featuring some people that he worked with, fellow nerds. So I was welcome to join them, and I did. I played my first completely sober game of Dungeons & Dragons, and had a lot of fun. We played that game for several months, and it became pretty clear to me that my friend, who was the dungeon master of the game, wasn't having the kind of fun that he wanted to. He really wanted to be a player, not the dungeon master, but he was so desperate to play Dungeons & Dragons that he was willing to shoulder that job, that burden. I didn't see it as much of a burden at the time. I actually thought it looked pretty fun and thought that I could do a good job of it. So I asked him to step aside for a little while, take a break, and let me give it a go. And he was welcome to be a player in my game. In fact, the entire group should play in my game. A few weeks later, I ran the first session of what would become an epic campaign that would span almost 2 years. And I got hooked. For the next 7 years, I would play D&D as often as possible. Usually, I'd be the dungeon master, entertaining and challenging my friends, but occasionally I'd also get to play, navigating through a fantasy world of magic and monsters in search of high adventure. But while I was enjoying the game, I wasn't just enjoying it. I was studying it, practicing it, trying to improve. When I began running D&D, I wasn't as good a DM or player as the other people I shared a table with, who had played before and played for years. I asked them what they had learned and how I could improve, and I took their advice. I bought every book for 5th edition that was available at the time, which was easy because back then there were only 3, and I read those suckers cover to cover. Shortly thereafter, I discovered the Acquisitions Incorporated podcast and subsequent live games, and then Critical Role. Those games made me aware that there were higher tiers of play out there, that there were greater heights I had not yet achieved from my small insular microcosm where I was the best dungeon master that any of my 5 friends knew. So I did what anyone these days will do when trying to improve at some skill. Went to the internet. I read articles. I joined forums. I joined Discord servers. I watched thousands of hours of YouTube videos with D&D luminaries, either playing the game or running the game, or discussing D&D and their philosophies, opinions, and approaches to it. I became a student of the game. I wanted every campaign to be better than the one that came before. I wanted each session to build upon what the last one had taught me. I wanted to give players at my table a great experience, no matter what side of the DM screen I was on, and I was willing to put in the work to make that happen. For 7 years, every day, I pursued excellence in D&D. Not saying that I've achieved it, but I was actively chasing after it. Playing and running Dungeons & Dragons are skills, and just like with any skill, when you want to improve, you study the greats, you read the literature, and then you practice, practice, practice. That became my approach to Dungeons & Dragons. It was a skill that I wanted to develop. When it came to D&D, I wanted to be better. So I decided that I was a D&D wannabe, someone who aspires to be something that they're currently not. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, that I wasn't alone. I figure that by watching videos on this channel, that you also think that maybe there's a better way to play D&D. Maybe you see a stream or an online game, and it makes you want to be like that, to run games or play games like that. Maybe you also spend your free time watching 5 tips videos and how-to videos about D&D. And maybe you're a D&D wannabe too. Maybe you see a D&D game online and you want to be like them, or play like them, or run like them. Maybe you also spend your free time watching 5 tips videos and how-to videos on the internet. Maybe you're looking for ways to improve. Maybe you're a D&D wannabe too. That's why I started writing articles. That's why I started the Bardic to Inspiration podcast with my brother. That's why I started making videos and why I started streaming on Twitch. Because it took me years to learn what I do know about this game. From all the rules to the best practices and behaviors at the table to why we do what we do and enjoy this game that we love. And I want to save you some time. I won't pretend that I'm perfect or that I know everything, but what I do know, I want to share. So we're going to take this journey together because I'm still on my journey. I still study, I still practice, and I'm very much still learning. And so I bet are you. So I invite you to return, to come back and listen to the things that I know, and to be active down in the comments, or reach out to me on Twitter and tell me about the things I don't, so maybe I can learn from you too. After all, the entire conceit of Dungeons & Dragons focuses on a group of like-minded friends banding together and going on a journey, unified as one, into the unknown, growing and changing along the way. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, welcome to my party. Here's to what's to come. Until next time, farewell, friends, adventurers, and fellow D&D wannabes.